Redditors who have been clinically dead, what did you experience in death, if anything? My dad clinically died for over a minute as a result of an iodine drip during a procedure, despite a documented severe iodine allergy. He described it as an out-of-body experience in which there was complete silence and he was the spectator in the upper corner of the room, watching the staff scramble to revive him. He said he had no concept of time or of the panic below, he just observed in total peace. He saw one nurse, finally, notice his bracelet and alert everyone of what the issue was. They cut the drip and continued their efforts to revive him. During this time, even though he was watching the end of his life, he felt in extreme peace and was pain-free for the first time in years. He was aware that he was dying, and he was ready and content. Everything got bright and he started to float upwards, until he saw a man that he didn't recognize who told him it wasn't his time yet. All at once, he was jolted back into his body and came to. Once stable, he described what he witnessed and even thanked the particular nurse that noticed his allergy alert bracelet. They were all baffled that he knew such detail. I can only hope that when he did pass away 4 years ago, it was an even more peaceful experience than this. It gives me peace knowing death was something that he had faced already, so he wasn't scared of it when it came again. Not me, but my late grandfather was clinically dead in the hospital's ICU after surgery many years ago, around 1990. I don't remember what surgery he had, but he was in his 80s and had a host of illnesses at that point. Diabetes, he broke his hip, etc. This particular night in the ICU he coded. They brought him back, and when he woke up, he asked a nurse, "How's the little boy doing?" She said, "What little boy?" "The little black boy with the gunshot wounds. How is he?" The nurse replied, "Oh, he's going to be okay." He asked other questions about patients who had been brought into the ER at the exact time he was clinically dead and on a different floor of the hospital. They asked how he knew about those patients, and he said he was floating and he saw them. He saw them working on himself, and floated to the ER and saw those patients. There were multiple witnesses, hospital employees at the time, to corroborate this. I remember being silently amazed at their lack of astonishment to his experience. Seems like this wasn't the first time this happened to a patient. So this is second hand from my dad, but he was always a little shaken up when he told this story. Years before I came along, my dad was cruising around on his motorcycle when a little dog ran into the road straight at him barking. He swerved so he wouldn't hit the poor pupper, and a car in opposing traffic did as well. My dad got clipped and thrown off his bike. It was on a hill, so he slid pretty far until his body hit a parked car. Now the weird part, he always got this sort of haunted look when he talked about it, which wasn't very often. He says he remembers plain as day standing at the bottom of the street on the corner watching as a man got hit off his bike and tumbled through the air and down the hill. He says he remembers thinking that guy is definitely going to die. He woke up the next day in the hospital with a nurse picking gravel out of his back. He had reconstruction surgery on his hand and arm, which consists mostly of metal pins now. Remember kids, if on a motorcycle, always wear your leathers and helmet. Without them my dad would have died and I wouldn't be around. I was hit by a car while riding a bicycle without a helmet when I was 17. I suffered a traumatic brain injury including a brain bleed, which led to a condition called status epilepticus. Not dead, but close. My heart worked, but I was without oxygen for a long time. I woke up in the hospital nearly 2 weeks later in severe pain. I had one heck of a headache. I had a weird recollection of a dreamlike state where I dreamed in 8-bit. Kinda like Mario, except it was a field of flowers and a bunny rabbit. It was quiet. I felt nothing. I was riding my bike 1 minute, and completely gone the next. It was a traumatic event I still have issues with nearly 15 years later. I nearly drowned in the ocean as a kid. A lifeguard on his very first day of training saw me thrashing from 1 stroke 4 miles away and was able to get to me after I had filled my lungs with salt water and sank. I do remember him gripping my arm before completely blacking out. Drowning, BTW, is a very comfy way to go. After the struggle and convulsive intake of water, there is a warm serenity. With my heart and lungs stopped, I was pronounced dead on the beach by trained lifeguards, but they kept up the CPR until the paramedics came and shocked me back to life. To this day I remember everything, both physically and mentally, about the incident vividly, way clearer than any other childhood memory. But the period I was pronounced to be dead was a black hole of non-conscious nothingness. So this is kind of interesting. The scariest thing during the whole incident was after I was shocked back to life and was too weak to move, I could feel the paramedic undoing the drawstring of my shorts. Oh my god. He's going to show everyone my PP, my feeble brain registered, before I once again blacked out. My grandmother, when she was a kid, was walking her dog when she got hit by a car. She and her dog hit a fire hydrant, and at that instant she rose up from the city block she was at with her dog. The dog survived. She reached the top of somewhere and a voice told her, "Look at your mother," who was crying. "You can't go, and you have a lot to do." So she came to in the hospital and tried to close her eyes and go back, and was crying because it was so peaceful. When my nan was young, she had a terrible fever and they told her later they thought she'd died. In her dream she wanted to climb a mountain, but an old man stopped her. He told her she has work to do first, before it would be her turn to climb. Not the same, but I was reminded of this by your story. Coded after attempting suicide with 8 of them, which is stupid. My son had passed away 3 years before, and I remember going to a place without time and watching him grow up without the neonatal Marfan syndrome and hydrocephalus that killed him. I should point out that I lost consciousness before code was called, so I don't remember rising out of my body. I do remember slamming back into it after being shocked, though. That was no fun. My life changed completely afterwards. I left my wife, who wasn't helping me in my own struggles with Marfan syndrome, got the guts to come out as trans, and found a great woman who supports me and is totally in love with me. I don't worry about anything but love and taking care of the people around me. Life is too short for anything else. A visit with my son sorted it all out. Hey guys, all the descriptions of death in this thread sound pretty euphoric, but if you're thinking of suicide, please reach out and get help. There's nothing magical about the effect it has on families. I know you posted this a while ago, but thank you for the reminder. I was having a hard night. It's a bit better now. I don't know if this counts, but I had surgery on my hip back in February '09 because I'd been in a car accident. When I was coming out of surgery, it was discovered that I'd been slightly overdosed on anesthetic. Never found out by how much though. Instead of the typical amount of time spent in the recovery room, I think I spent a solid 2.5 hours in there. I kept falling asleep and ceasing to breathe every 30-60 seconds for over an hour. Every time I faded out, everything simply went black. I felt nothing. I saw nothing. But there was no fear, no pain. I do remember feeling incredibly calm, and like I was being torn between 2 completely different dimensions every time I alternated between being conscious and slipping away. Interestingly, it was my mother yelling at me to breathe every time I faded out that kept me waking back up. It was a really strange experience. I don't know if I was clinically dead because it was for such short periods of time, but it definitely made me less afraid of dying. I'm sure this will sound insane to some, but I'm pretty convinced that there is a lot we don't know about the universe, and I believe that our consciousnesses are a part of it. I believe quite firmly that when we die, we don't cease to exist, because we've always been here and we always will be, just like everything that is, just in a different form, like how, at one point, everything that exists now was once a simple collection of hydrogen atoms. The universe just had to take a lot of time to develop what would become consciousness, and bodies to house it, so that it could finally observe itself. But bodies don't last forever, and we should all feel incredibly lucky to have been given the chance to be a part of existence that was alive and self-aware. I know I do. Never been dead. Just been around hundreds of people before death, and almost 100% of those people were the most at peace with it. The family is never ready, but the person is. It's eerily beautiful how many people have told me it's okay, they're ready to die. So many people describing this floating feeling and seeing the hospital room from above and seeing themselves. Interesting. People who say they were aware of everything but can't move is my nightmare. It's one of the reasons why I want to be cremated. Can't stand the thought of being trapped in my own dead body forever. One of my old frat brothers was clinically dead for like 40 seconds because of Xanax. He said that he saw himself floating above his body in the hospital room. He said that he could see doctors and nurses working on him and family in the room. He said he slowly floated above the hospital and towards a light. He said the most peaceful feeling he has ever experienced washed over him. This is a person who has done MDMA and coke in college. He said it's almost impossible to describe the feeling with our vocabulary. He said it feels like a weight was lifted off you. He said he saw some long gone family in the light but they told him it wasn't his time. He said he was angry because he felt so good but floated back down to his body. I have no idea if he is telling the truth but he is a trustworthy friend. He never used drugs again. I've died twice this year. It was much like time travel. 1 minute I was, then I wasn't, then I was again. No sense of time really. I could have been dead for 1 second or 1 century. There was a sense of confusion and time slowing down as I died, then just nothing. This gets kind of graphic so be warned. I was raped by a guy I don't know. What's worse was that it was pretty violent. I remember the moment where the pain was too much to handle. He was choking me and after what was 80 seconds, I counted. I just stopped. I felt my heart stop. Everything faded and I was in this awkward phase where it felt like I was being pulled out of my body. He got scared and started hitting my chest really hard. I felt like I was watching it happen. The panic in his eyes. But I felt nothing physically. I just watched, emotionless. After what I'm sure was seconds but felt timeless, I felt like I was sucked back into reality. My head hurt really badly and he just got more angry when I started responding. I spent the rest of the rape trying to comprehend it. I'm sorry you went through that. I have 2 stories. When I was 9 I used to have fainting spells. One time I fell down the stairs and lost consciousness. My mom said I went as stiff as a board. I remember, as if floating near the ceiling, watching my mom run to the phone and calling 911. I could see my dad start to do CPR on me. Then I looked behind me and saw a bright light and heard a voice say it's not your time. Then I went back into my body as I heard my dad yell come on. Dang it, I was really scared when I came to, and it took me a while, like years, to figure out what I had experienced. I can't explain what happened. I felt calm though while I was out. I don't know if I was really dead or just unconscious and my mind made it all up. The other story I know was real. 6 years ago my brother died from adrenal cancer. His wife and I slept in his hospital room that night. His friends and the 2 of us sat around his bed as he lay unconscious and told stories about my brother and laughed about all the great times we had with him. At 3 AM I woke from a dream I was having of seeing him walking down a large tunnel that had a bright light at the end of it. He was healthy looking again and he turned around to look at me, smiled and waved, then walked into the light. When I woke up I rolled over to look at him. He had stopped breathing. I touched him and he was still warm and his skin was still soft, as if he had just passed away a moment before. It was like he hung on until he knew we would be okay and then waited to pass until we were sleeping so we didn't have to watch him take his last breaths. I loved my brother. He was my best friend, my biggest champion, and he encouraged me and built me up when I had no confidence in myself. God, I miss him, but I'm relieved that he's not in pain and suffering anymore. I had a similar experience. Remember medics banging on my chest telling me not to give up. I remember hearing everything everyone was saying. I even remember thinking, dude, stop hitting my chest. I remember being put in the ambulance and being in the emergency room. When I told my mom later that I heard all of them and remember everything, she told me there was no way I could have because I was completely unresponsive when they found me. It definitely had a profound effect on me. It's made me actually more afraid of death because I personally believe your brain lives long after your body stops, which is extremely terrifying. It still lives for a few minutes until it becomes deprived of oxygen. It's pretty scary to me as well, especially if you realize at some point that it's happening and you can't speak to anyone about it. Long story short, I had a bad reaction to a bunch of medication after a C-section and died for a short period of time. I never got to hold my son. I remember hearing people talking calmly but stern and a lot of beeping. Then it was quite a bit like others described, calm, black, and then just nothing. I heard someone, probably a nurse, say that it was time to be a mommy and meet my boy. I faded in and out until eventually I woke up. It sounds cheesy, but if it wasn't for my son, I probably would have never come back. I wasn't dead, but I was dying. I passed out on the floor on my back and puked while on the ground. I remember being surrounded by nothingness, then all of a sudden this loud terrible static that overwhelmed me completely. Everything started beating, and in retrospect, this was my heartbeat. Suddenly, the static and noise began fading inwards until it became a small speck and I felt air rushing into me. My vision came back and an EMT was bagging me. I felt terribly weak and groggy, but all in all, terrible experience. I think it was me coming back to life. IDK. My father died on the table for 2 minutes. He tells me that he ended up on a beach and his grandfather was there, and they sat and talked for a while. Then he came back. Not me, but my mom. She had gotten an ulcer back in 2008. When she got to the hospital, she said there was a male doctor that told her she needed surgery immediately or she would die. She said that during this time, she was fighting and thrashing and screaming because my father had just abandoned us and she was desperately trying to get back to us. She said the male doctor told her everything was going to be okay and that we were safe and sound. After her experience, she checked out of the hospital and a couple of weeks later turned up at the same hospital with a cake and card, hoping to find the male doctor that took care of her. When she got there, she described him, and the woman at the help desk was confused. There had been no male doctor that day, or any day. All the staff were females. The said man never even worked there. A lot of time has passed, but I always like to think an angel watched over my mom that night and that helped my mom get back to my family. Was firefighter. My life flashed before my eyes, like remembering a dream a lot all at once. Find a happy life. Every experience you experienced is recorded in your brain, in scary detail. If that went on forever, you will want to live a better life. I wasn't clinically dead. Is that possible to survive? But I experienced something that I can never fully describe. It was kinda like being in a room alone, but then you somehow sense that someone else is there. That someone else was an energy, pure good energy. It was a humbling experience. Can't write much now, but maybe later I'll try to explain further. Before we met, my now wife went into septic shock, died for a couple of minutes. She told me that all she saw was darkness. She felt nothing, but she did hear someone saying her son's name, and she felt herself float towards the voice and then woke up in the ICU. I overdosed twice. I've been clean for 6 years now. The first time, I felt nothing at first. I just remember falling down. I was by myself in my room and my brother was in the living room. He had no idea. I couldn't really move and I tried to text my mom, whom was luckily on her way home from work. Text didn't make sense, so the first thing she did when she got home was find me. I don't remember, but the next thing I do remember is feeling like lava was being injected into my brain and like I just wanted to get up and go. No life flashing before my eyes, nothing like that, just lava in the brain. The second time I had no idea it even happened, but my best friend saved my life. I know it's kinda morbid, but that's definitely the way I'd be down to go out. It was just like I fell asleep. I'm glad I didn't die, though. I never thought things could get as good as they are if I just used my head and did what I knew I was supposed to. Got help, got clean, getting married. True story. I had a clinical chief senior surgeon. During training always ask the same question after a heroic resuscitation that involved open heart massage to regain a beat in the trauma bay, aka a left lateral thoracotomy. Hospitals were different then. Large wards with 6 patients that we would round on with medical students, residents, fellows, and attending. Maybe 20 people. So he would ask, do you remember anything? And the gangbangers would inevitably say it was a scary experience and they were frightened by demons or some nightmare scenario. And the victim of a random act of violence like a getting stabbed during a mugging would say, I saw a white light. It wasn't scary, or, it was beautiful. I'm not particularly religious and reasoned this away as the mental state of the victim, but it would give me chills to hear some of the answers. Okay, so this will get buried for sure, but here we go. When I was 15, I was dead for a short while during an ambulance ride. I have no idea how long it was, TBH. My therapist often suggested I find out the details to know how close I came to permanent death. But that's too much for me. Anyways, onto my experience. I was in so much pain and anxiety leading up to it, you have no idea. I wanted it to end. And then, everything faded away. first to black, and then to something I can only describe as seeing and feeling existence itself. I don't even know how to describe this. It's the only way I can describe what it was, because it was so beyond normal perception. Mind you, I'm not a religious person, so that was definitely strange. All my pain was gone, and I felt great, like I was getting a warm hug from the universe, and everything was truly awesome. Coming back was fairly sudden, first hearing voices and then a fading back into where I was. This was definitely the most unpleasant part. The closest thing I can compare the fading in out to visually would be when a movie does a slow fade between scenes, and the feeling is similar to laying down in bed. That last second before you fall asleep and are totally relaxed and not thinking, just experiencing your being. All this said, I fear death more than anything else. Yes, it was pleasant, but I never want to have that experience again. I'm actually on the verge of tears just thinking about it right now. Maybe it's my atheism showing, but death as a permanent thing just terrifies me. So there's my story, make of it what you will. My mother died 3 times during a year-long hospital stay in the mid-60s. She was hit by a drunk driver. The shortest time was 7 minutes, the longest was 12 minutes. Docs told my grandmother to make funeral arrangements, that she wouldn't be going home. She was 18. During 12-minute death she felt euphoria, was aware of people around her, but says some people she was aware of were people that had died before her, like her father. I'm not sure if I was clinically dead or not, but I drowned in the ocean 4 years ago, saving 2 children who had been swept out to sea by a freak landslip and subsequent strong current. I don't really remember my last action before drowning, but the lifeboat crew said they saw me, and before going under I threw the children to them. They said the only explanation is a rush of adrenaline at the sight of them arriving and knowing help had arrived, as there should have been no way I could have thrown 2 kids in that situation. To be perfectly honest, I had given up hope as I felt my energy sapping trying to keep the children above the water, as all 3 of us were clothed and I felt the lactic acid building up, and try as I may I couldn't move my limbs anymore. I was just telling the children it was going to be okay, knowing full well I was about to run out of steam any moment. The relief of getting to them was swiftly replaced by dread as I turned and realized how far we were from the beach, and the terrifying realization of how fatigued I was set in, and thinking that there was no way we were going to survive. After I threw both children to the crew who had arrived at speed with rescue gear, they said I went under. Only by sheer luck did they manage to pull me out of the water too and revive me. I remember clearly not being able to see when I went under the waves and beneath the ocean, and as I started to breathe in the water, instead of fear I felt strong sadness at not knowing if I had done enough to save them. A couple of gulps later I must have gone unconscious, as the next thing I remember is being revived by CPR, apparently, and coming round. It was very confusing and I haven't really talked about it until now, but the one thing that is deeply strange to me is that there was no fear at the point of drowning, only calm and the wish that I knew that the children had made it and they were safe. Very strange. The children are 11 and 8 now and living happy lives, thank goodness. It could have been so very different, and I don't take life for granted, that's for sure. Every day is a gift. Sorry for the long post, but the original question resonated with me and I haven't really talked about it much since it happened. Found out that my heart stopped during a surgery, but ended up fine. Just woke up from surgery like normal. So yeah, didn't really experience anything, but I probably wasn't exactly dead either. Turns out you were mostly dead. Mostly dead is slightly alive. This is a great and interesting question. I hope more people answer. I haven't experienced this BTW. Upvoting for visibility. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.